On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, we preview the game against the St. Louis Blues. Can Cam Fowler help the Edmonton Oilers? And we take a look at the Edmonton Oilers prospects south of the border. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I am your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to start off with a little preview of the game tonight between the Edmonton Oilers and the St. Louis Blues. The Blues having a little bit of an off season here. A lot of chatter around what the Blues might do heading into the rest of the season. Potentially a big game for the Blues tonight in Edmonton. We will talk about that in just a second. But also on today's episode, another name has emerged from the Anaheim Ducks as a potential return coming to the Edmonton Oilers. Cam Fowler. Can he help the Edmonton Oilers? We will talk about that in a little bit as well. And to wrap up today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Edmonton Oilers prospects playing down in the United States. Not just the players in the NCAA, but also we do have a player in the USHL who's having a pretty good season so far. We will talk about that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Where we are going to start off today is with as mentioned, the St. Louis Blues are in town tonight against the Edmonton Oilers. A 7 o'clock puck drop at Rogers Place. And it'll be an interesting one as the St. Louis Blues aren't exactly having the best start to their season. 13-15-1 so far to start the year. And they are currently just they're on a 1-game win streak, won their last game. So a little bit of a back and forth season for St. Louis, and we've seen the 2 games that the Oilers have played against the Blues. They haven't been able to generate a lot of offense in general. So can the Edmonton Oilers start to build off that? Let's take a look at the Edmonton Oilers lineup for tonight. No changes really in this one, as Leon Draisaitl will be on a line with Connor McDavid and Zach Hyman. Of course they will be, as they just scored 13 points on the Nashville Predators. Pretty decent. Matthias Janmark still in the top 6 with the Edmonton Oilers as he lines up next to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Kyler Yamamoto. Dylan Holloway, James Hamblin, and Jesse Puljujärvi make up the third line. It'll be interesting to see if we do have a visitor as well for this game. Not sure if Verbeek will be in the building for this one. Of course, Anaheim will be in Edmonton either way on Saturday to take a look at Jesse Puljujärvi and the fourth line of Klim Kostin, Devon Shore, and Derek Ryan. The defenseman for the Oilers goes as follows: Darnell Nurse with Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak, and Tyson Barrie, Philip Broberg alongside Evan Bouchard, and the Edmonton Oilers will be starting with Stuart Skinner in between the pipes tonight. Will not follow along or give Campbell a back-to-back start. Assume he'll probably start against Anaheim, probably the easier game there for Campbell. Now on the flip side, the St. Louis Blues, let's take a look at the Blues lineup as they have a couple of interesting names here as well. Brendan Saad lines up next to Ryan O'Reilly and Josh Levo. O'Reilly's having a little bit of a tough season so far. Last time I checked, I believe 2 goals in his season so far. Unless he scored a goal in the last game, he's still sitting at that. Pavel Buchnevich will line up next to Braden Shen and Vladimir Tarasenko. Ivan Barbashev will be with Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, which is very interesting considering Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou are the 2 leading scorers on the St. Louis Blues. But either way, Toropchenko will line up next to Noel Acciari, and former Edmonton Oiler Tyler Pitlick. Also, the defenseman for the Blues tonight, Nick Leddy, will be alongside Colton Parayko, Torrey Krug with Justin Falk, almost said Torrey Falk for some reason, and Miles Mikkola will be alongside Robert Bortuzzo. Jordan Binnington getting the start for St. Louis. Now, the Edmonton Oilers might be in big here. This might be another one of those really big games for the Edmonton Oilers if they can catch the St. Louis Blues off guard. Yes, they had a big 8-3 or 8-2 victory, 8-2, victory against the Arizona Coyotes just last week. Then they had the big win in Nashville just on Tuesday. And tough loss against Minnesota, but you can kind of move past that one, especially considering they won the game on Friday. So the Edmonton Oilers are coming in with a little bit of a hot streak. Yes, they've won 3 of their last 4. And St. Louis, on the other hand, well, not a lot is going their way. The only 2 teams below the St. Louis Blues in their division right now is the Arizona Coyotes, who are only behind by 5 points, and the Chicago Blackhawks. That does not spell success for the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Edmonton Oilers have also just come off a victory over the team who is currently tied in the standings with the St. Louis Blues, and that's the Nashville Predators. So the Edmonton Oilers might be really catching a team who is struggling right now, and so much so that their penalty kill could be a difference in this one. As of course, you know, the Edmonton Oilers currently sit on top of the NHL in power play, or with the power play, as the Edmonton Oilers power play is currently at 31.5, as they've been on an absolute heater recently. 11 of their last 24 on the power play. I mean, McDavid, Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Over the last 5 years, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has the most goals for per 60 minutes than anybody in the NHL. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. That's great. Above Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Of course, second and third are Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but actually I think it's the other way around. But that's saying something for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. The penalty kill, however, for the St. Louis Blues is second last. The only team that is below the St. Louis Blues in penalty kill is the worst team in the league, the Anaheim Ducks. Their power play or penalty kill, currently sits at 67.7%. 31st in the league. Now, their power play is also not as good as well, as they sit 21.5% on the season, currently 19th in the league compared to the Oilers first. And the Oilers penalty kill currently sits 26, but has been better recently. They are at a 72.4%. So special teams could be the story in this one. The big thing as well for the Oilers, we'll see if the Oilers can get kind of in Jordan Binnington's head. We can see a lot of guys, maybe a Leon Draisaitl who got into Marc-Andre Fleury's head on Friday, potentially Kyler Yamamoto, Iesa Puljujärvi. Just make sure you don't really give him a lot of space. Now, Klim Kostin is also playing his former team tonight. He was asked about how he feels playing against his former team and if he still watches St. Louis Blues games. He said it's just another game for him, but he does still watch some of the St. Louis Blues games, and it's nice to see some familiar faces as well. Now, if you also watched that press conference with Klim Kostin, you also would have probably seen him take a little bit of a jab at Jim Matheson in playful fun. That is the type of locker room stuff you like to see, not the calling out of media member. Of course, people feel very strongly one way or the other towards Matheson. I'm not going to voice those opinions on this show, but He did in the interview today go, Twitter doesn't really like your questions. Maybe you need to change something. So it's nice to see a little bit of playful fun. And Jim Matheson, of course, took it well. So that's what you like to see. A little bit of joy in the Edmonton Oilers locker room right now. As the Edmonton Oilers face off against the St. Louis Blues tonight with a 7 o'clock puck drop. Stuart Skinner versus Jordan Binnington in this one. Did I say Jordan Binnington in this one? We shall see who the Edmonton Oilers, or how the Edmonton Oilers will do in this one, and who comes out on top. Either way, it has been known and spoken about all year that the Edmonton Oilers need some sort of defensive help. And now with Pat Verbeek being at the last two Edmonton Oilers games, Anaheim playing in Edmonton on Saturday, another name has come to the surface as a possibility for the Edmonton Oilers, and that's Cam Fowler. Can Cam Fowler help the Edmonton Oilers in any way, and how so? We will talk about that in just a second, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season and basketball, even to the World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline. Guys, I'm a UCLA football fan. We finally have bowl football. It's been so long. I swear. Chip Kelly bringing us to the promised land, finally getting some bowl games here. Wonder what the odds on that game is, as bowl season is right around the corner for college football. I know Canadians are a little hit or miss on it, but I'm telling you, college bowl season is unlike anything. Either way, if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to this one, you probably do, they've got those at BetOnline as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alrighty, thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen today. Now for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcasts. Alrighty, let's take a look at Cam Fowler, as the Edmonton Oilers have been linked to another Anaheim Duck. It's going to happen until a trade is finished here. It seems like the Edmonton Oilers and the Anaheim Ducks are probably going to make a deal together. So let's keep the speculation going, as Cam Fowler has been the flavor of the day today, and I can see why. John Shannon came on to Oilers Now today and mentioned that, you know what, if he were to invest in a defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers, it would be Cam Fowler, not Jakob Chychrun, not a Klingberg, Cam Fowler. Interesting. He was drafted in the same year as Taylor Hall, so does have the tenure a little bit as well. And as Bob Stauffer pointed out in his draft year, even there were questions on whether or not he was going to go first overall. A highly touted guy. They mentioned as well just how the Anaheim selected him at 12th, and they were all very proud of what they did. Fair enough, as Cam Fowler has been one of the more consistent defensemen and quietly consistent defensemen in the NHL. And now with the maybe not deterioration isn't the best word, but with the current state of the Anaheim Ducks, we're going to see a lot of those players and contracts moved out. Cam Fowler, John Klingberg. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of the top end talent as well, potentially leaving. Obviously not guys like Zegras or McTavish, but you know what I'm saying here. And now Cam Fowler has been linked to the Oilers. So far this year, Cam Fowler's been having a very solid season. In 30 games this year, 3 goals, 12 assists, 15 points, a half a point per game, which is very impressive considering the team he is currently on and also considering his age. Not saying he's old or anything like that, but is a tenured veteran in this league. The last couple of years as well for him has he's continued to be a very solid defenseman. In 76 games last year, 9 goals, 33 assists, good for 42 points. And then in the COVID-shortened year, 56 games, 5 goals, 18 assists, 23 points. Now, his career high in goals came in 2016-2017 with 11, but his career highs in both assists and points came just last year with 33 assists and 42 points. But you know me, and you know that I like these advanced stats. So let's take a look at it. I shouldn't say these advanced stats because then people will go, "Oh, he's an analytical guy. He likes the J Fresh stuff." No, I have no idea. If you put one of those J Fresh boards in front of me, I'd go, "Yeah, red means good, right?" I don't know, but I do like my goals for and goals against per 60 minutes because that puts everybody on the exact same plane and gives you a better image of what these players do while they are on the ice. So let's take a look at the goals for and goals against for Cam Fowler per 60 minutes. So far this season, Cam Fowler has had a 2.07 goals for per 60 minutes in all situations and a 3.68 goals against per 60 minutes, which is currently good for 11th and 9th on the Anaheim Ducks. However, on the Edmonton Oilers, it would be good for 13th and 22nd. Now, you have to also remember that these are also based on the worst team in the NHL in Anaheim and the Edmonton Oilers. So most of these stats are going to be skewed a little. A team who didn't get their first win in regulation until November. Give them a little bit of leeway here. But at 5-on-5, his goals for per 60 minutes is at a 1.28, and his goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 is currently sitting at a 2.72. Now, his goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 is currently 18th on the Ducks, which is 22nd on the Oilers. But here's the big thing. His goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which if you watch hockey, you know that 5-on-5 is when most of the game is being played. He is third on the Anaheim Ducks. Now that 2.72 would be good for 14th on the Edmonton Oilers, but again, you take a look at the discrepancies between the Edmonton Oilers and the Anaheim Ducks, and you sit there and go, third on the worst team in the league is pretty respectable. Now you have to also take it with a grain of salt. As mentioned, it is the worst team in the league, so you have to sit there and go, how much of that stock can you put into it? But considering, again, this is the worst team in the league, and he's minimizing the amount of damage that team is taking, that's a plus. That is a plus. Now on the power play and the penalty kill, as he does play both. And that is the big thing for Cam Fowler. He's not just a defensive defenseman or an offensive defenseman. He is a two-way defenseman, and he plays in both ends relatively well, relatively solid, and he's always had very good scouting reports when it comes to that. So on the power play so far this year, he sits at a 6.57 with goals for per 60 minutes, which is 5th on the Anaheim Ducks, which would be good for 8th on the Oilers, would probably be higher on the Edmonton Oilers as well. My question would be would he play on the power play over, maybe not over Tyson Barrie, but over an Evan Bouchard, maybe? I don't know. And then on the penalty kill, he currently sits at an 11.75, which is 5th on the team as well. In that situation, it would be 11th on the Edmonton Oilers. But again, you have to remember that penalty kill is currently worst in the league. So, yeah, you should take all that with a grain of salt. So I decided, okay, yes, it's the worst team in the league. They haven't been great for a little while. So let's take an average of his last 5 years and put it up to the rest of the NHL. It's been below average. I would go through all the numbers, but it would just all get really mudded and it wouldn't really matter. All of his numbers are right at average or just below average, which isn't necessarily a poor thing or a bad thing. I mean, if you're going to be above average, you're probably going to be A, making a lot more money, and B, probably much more difficult to get off a team like the Anaheim Ducks. Now, the issue is I've heard that the value for a Cam Fowler might be and probably will be a first-round pick and a prospect. I heard one of the prospects might be Philip Broberg. Are you willing to move of Philip Broberg for Cam Fowler plus a protected first-round pick? Yeah, I don't know. I would still probably reserve that first-round pick and a prospect for a Jakob Chychrun, solely based on the age of the player. Because with Jakob Chychrun, you have a couple more years of control. He's only 24, so you're able to also keep developing him. He's not a finished product by any means, is Jakob Chychrun. So yes, you can help the Oilers defense by bringing in a guy like Jakob Chychrun, but also help build the team, not around him, but help build the team with him in the lineup. With Cam Fowler, he's not necessarily on the back end of his career, but he's not exactly on the front nine. You know what I'm saying? So, yes, would Cam Fowler help the Edmonton Oilers today? Absolutely. And tomorrow, yes. Next year, yes. The year after, maybe now we're starting to get into a little question mark. Then you're starting to hope maybe a guy like Luka Munzenberger will come in, maybe Philip Kemp, Michael Kesselring, some of those guys, Vincent Desharnais, Marcus Niemelainen. Look at all the defensemen we just named who might end up being on the Oilers in just 2 years' time. So you sit here, and then in the same conversation, if you do have a Jakob Chychrun, does he now become a surplus? And then only a couple of years down the road, is he expendable? There's a whole bunch of variables that go with it. What do you guys think? Would you guys prefer Cam Fowler? Would you prefer Jakob Chychrun? John Klingberg? Who would you prefer here for the Edmonton Oilers? Either way, let's move into potential future Edmonton Oilers, as I just named one of them. I did just name one of them that we will take a look at. Let's take a look at the Edmonton Oilers prospects currently playing south of the border, not just in college, but also in the USHL. We will talk about them in just a second, but first, today's episode is brought to you by the NHTSA. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to the end, people start to head out, and you think of calling for a ride. Nah. You live nearby and you can make it home, okay? It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyways? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up? You lose your license? You lose your job? You total your car? You kill someone? Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That is why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Alrighty, as I reach over for our final segment for today, our notes on our final segment of today. And let's take a look at the Edmonton Oilers prospects who are currently playing down south in the United States. We have 4 players currently playing in the NCAA in the first division, Div 1 of NCAA. And then we also are going to talk about today about a USHL player that I don't think a lot of people talk about but is having a quietly good season with the Youngstown Phantoms. We'll talk about him last, but first we're going to talk about one of my favorite prospects in the entire organization, and that is Luka Munzenberger. Luka Munzenberger was selected the 90th overall pick back in 2020, and a lot of people were very interested as to who this guy was. The Oilers were able to see him play in their own rink during the World Juniors back in 2020, back when there was the COVID year, and people were sitting there going, why would the Oilers pick this guy? Well, he is a big shutdown defenseman. He can skate. And the thing that a lot of people say about him is that he is a win-at-all-cost player. That is the type of player that I always mention when I bring up this segment here. But Tyler Wright, the head of amateur scouting for the Edmonton Oilers, they love players who will go out there and have a motor and great athleticism, a great athlete, and someone who goes out there and just plays to win. You're seeing that kind of pay off with a guy like Clean Costin with the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of the guys call him a rink rat because he's always around the team. You've heard that term around Xavier Bourgault. You've heard it around Luka Munzenberger, and that is really kind of the type of player that the Edmonton Oilers want in their organization, and that's what they're getting with Luka Munzenberger. So far this year, Munzenberger has 14 games under his belt, did miss a couple games with injury, no goals so far, but does have 4 assists, which is higher than his career high with 3 last year. He does have 14 penalty minutes as well. However, he has been pointless in his last 10 games, which means he did have 4 points in 4 games, has kind of slowed down a little bit, but because he's been focusing on his defensive game, he has 12 of his last 15 blocks so far this year have happened in those 10 games, so a little bit of a trade-off. The offense is kind of tapered off, but those blocks and that real demanding play from Munzenberger has started to show up for him and the University of Vermont. University of Vermont, who is currently coached by Jay Woodcroft's brother, is currently sitting at a 6-11-1 record. Not a fantastic year so far, but a lot of time to turn it around. Now, let's talk about one of his teammates on the team, as the Edmonton Oilers took Joel Mata with their final pick in the 2022 draft. Another player who plays under Woodcroft's brother, and again 6-11-1 so far this year, and a player who is again one of those players who isn't going to be super flashy on the score sheet, but will do whatever it takes to win. Joel Mata went from playing on the 4th line to the 1st line for Finland in the World Juniors in his final year in the World Juniors as well, and really looked good for Finland, played in some very important games, and so far, very important times in games, and so far this year, not a bad season, already beating his career high in goals with 3 so far this year in 18 games, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. That was exactly what he had last year. He had 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in the entire year. So he's already at his season or his career high almost. Either way, he has 2 points in his last 6 games and is currently 55% in the faceoff dot. Now, as mentioned, I did say that he is a player that isn't going to be on the score sheet a lot, but he's a bottom 6 guy. He works very hard in his own end, really is pays attention to the finer details in his game, and takes pride in preventing the other team from scoring. So that's the type of player you're getting from Joel Mata. Not a flashy guy or anything like that. So these 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points in 18 games shouldn't really shock you, because he is a player who doesn't really focus on that. Those points will just naturally come. But either way, you can see the University of Vermont with Luka Munzenberger and Joel Mata the next time they play on December 30th. They are currently on their Christmas break break as they will play Lindenwood on December 30th to wrap up the year. Well, wrap up the 2022 calendar as they flip over to 2023. Alrighty, let's move on to another lesser known prospect for the Edmonton Oilers, and this is Tomas Mazura, however you want to pronounce it until he comes to the NHL and you'll know for sure. But he is currently playing at the University of St. Lawrence, was at Providence last year, but is now finding a little bit of success with St. Lawrence. They're currently 8-0 on their season. In 13 games so far, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points on the year. But in his second most recent game, they played against Yale, and he had 2 points in that one, a beautiful goal and an assist. And in that one, he was able to get it through the goaltender on a partial breakaway. He has, if you go on Twitter, a lot of his highlights or points, I guess, are on Twitter. You can find him there. Has been a very good ad for St. Lawrence. His next game is also on December 30th, as basically the entire NCAA is currently on their Christmas break. I can't believe it's already Christmas. It's already December 15th. It is beyond me. But anyways, December 30th is his next game as they will play Omaha, the Nebraska at Omaha on December 30th in that one. Now, the final player currently playing in the NCAA, currently playing on the best team of any of the Edmonton Oilers prospects, and that is Skylar Brendamore. Yes, the son of Rod Brendamore, Rod the Bod. But he's currently playing at Quinnipiac, and Quinnipiac is having a heck of a season. 14-1-3 so far this year, and a lot of thanks can come to Brendamore. 18 games played so far, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points, only has 2 penalty minutes so far. I mean, he's almost at a point per game basis so far with Quinnipiac, and has been fantastic. He has 4 goals in his last 5 games, 6 points in those last 5 games, and is currently sitting at a 57.6% in the faceoff dots. So he has been a player that Quinnipiac can really rely upon in the faceoff dot, in the offensive zone, and has really turned it on in the last couple of games. As mentioned, they are currently in their Christmas break, so his next game won't come until December 30th against Union, but maybe a player to start looking at here is he was drafted all the way back in the 2017 draft. Now, you're probably looking at some of these players as Mazura and Mata and Brendamore all weren't exactly selected very high. They were all selected in the 5th round, or lower, and even Luka Munzenberger selected 90th, not a very high draft pick. However, in Skylar Brendamore's case, yes, he was drafted in 2017, but look at the players who are now starting to make a little bit of a difference in the Oilers organization. Michael Kesselring, Phil Kemp, Vincent Desharnais. These are all guys who were drafted by the Edmonton Oilers, Marcus Niemelainen too, in 2016 and 2017. And now they're starting to make very impressive cases to potentially play on the Edmonton Oilers roster in a year or so. So don't start to rule out these players for the Edmonton Oilers, as these guys can very much play in the NHL at some point soon. But either way, Skylar Brendamore, as mentioned, his next game is December 30th in Union. Now, we mentioned the players who are currently in college. Let's mention a player who is he is about to go to college. He has committed to Boston College, but Shane LaChance was selected by the Edmonton Oilers in 2021, I was going to say 2021, but selected in 2021 by the Edmonton Oilers, and is currently playing for the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL, United States Hockey League. They're a very good talent can come out of that league there, a very underrated league, and very fun to watch, to be honest with you. But so far this year, Shane LaChance in 21 games, 14 goals, 5 assists, 19 points, and is currently on pace for 6 in 62 games, have 41 goals, 15 assists, 56 points. So a very productive season so far for Shane LaChance, and so far 5 goals in his last 6 games. watch out for this kid because, as mentioned, he can be a point producer, playing in a very good league as well. But on his roster, currently sits at 6'4", 218 pounds. Excuse me, I shouldn't say 6'4", 6'4" and 3/4. He's a big boy. So maybe a player to watch in the Edmonton Oilers lineup. Unlike some of the other Edmonton Oilers prospects, or at least the college prospects, I should say, the Youngstown Phantoms are not currently on a Christmas break, and their next game comes tomorrow against Muskegon. So I believe when I still had my Hockey TV subscription, you could watch USHL games on there. So if you do have a Hockey TV subscription, which I would highly recommend because Hockey TV is fantastic if you are trying to keep up with these prospects. But either way, let's wrap it up there. As mentioned, the Edmonton Oilers face off against the St. Louis Blues tonight, 7 o'clock puck drop at Rogers Place. Stuart Skinner versus Jordan Binnington, and we shall see if Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and that line alongside Zach Hyman can keep the hot streak going. We shall wrap it up there. I shall see it tomorrow as we head off into the weekend, and we shall preview the game against the Anaheim Ducks. Will Anaheim leave without a player and with Jesse Puljujärvi? We shall see. We will talk about that and much more on tomorrow's episode. But until then, hopefully by the end of this one against St. Louis, we can play La Bamba, baby.